I should have known something was wrong when Marcus ordered the most expensive wine without asking what I wanted. We were sitting in the private dining room of the Riverside Country Club, the kind of place where the waiters know your name and your family's net worth before you even sit down. Crystal chandeliers caught the late afternoon sun, scattering gold across white tablecloths. My brother James had insisted on this dinner to discuss his wedding plans. 300 guests, a venue that cost more than most people's houses, the kind of celebration that would be photographed for society magazines. I watched Marcus charm my mother with stories about his latest acquisition, some tech startup in Silicon Valley. His hand rested on the table, close to mine but not touching. When had that started? When had the distance become so carefully measured? My mother laughed at something he said, that delighted sound she reserved for people she thought were taking good care of her daughter. If only she knew that lately. Taking care of me meant forgetting I existed until he needed a +1 for some business dinner. James and his fiancée Sarah were glowing, leaning into each other the way people do when they still believe love conquers everything. I remembered when Marcus and I used to sit like that, before the late nights at the office, before the phone calls he took in another room, before I became the wife he had instead of the woman he wanted. The appetizers arrived, oysters on ice. Marcus made a show of squeezing lemon over them, and I realized I was watching him the way you watch a stranger, cataloging movements, searching for clues. Sarah was describing the floral arrangements when Marcus interrupted, his voice casual. Too casual. "Oh, by the way, I invited Victoria to the wedding." The words landed like broken glass on marble. My mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. James went completely still. Sarah's eyes darted to me, then away. The silence stretched, pulled tight as a wire. I felt my hand tighten around my water glass. The condensation was cold against my palm. I focused on that. The cold. The solid weight of crystal. Anything but the way my heart had just dropped into my stomach. Victoria. I kept my voice level. Friendly even. "Your ex-girlfriend, Victoria? She's a family friend." Marcus didn't look at me when he said it. He was cutting into an oyster with surgical precision. "Our families have known each other for decades. It would be rude not to invite her. Our families. Not his family and mine. His family and hers." I thought about Victoria. The photographs I'd seen in his mother's house, still displayed after all these years. Victoria at charity galas. Victoria on someone's yacht. Victoria with Marcus's arm around her waist. Both of them tanned and laughing, looking like they'd stepped out of a Ralph Lauren advertisement. They'd dated for 5 years. 5 years of country club summers and ski trips to Aspen. 5 years of being the couple everyone expected to get married. Then he met me. I'd told myself their story was over, ancient history. But sitting there, watching him refuse to meet my eyes, I understood something with crystalline clarity. You don't casually invite your ex to a family wedding. You don't do it without discussing it with your wife first. Not unless you want to send a message. My mother tried to salvage the moment. "Well, I'm sure it will be lovely to see Victoria again. She was always so charming." Was. Past tense. But the way she said it sounded like present tense admiration wrapped in diplomatic packaging. Marcus finally looked at me, and I saw something in his expression that made my chest tighten. Not guilt, not apology, something closer to defiance, as if he'd expected me to make a scene and was almost disappointed I hadn't. "You don't mind, do you?" He asked it like an afterthought. Like my opinion was a formality he had to observe, but didn't actually need. Everyone was watching me now. My brother's face was creased with concern. Sarah looked ready to say something, but I caught her eye and shook my head slightly. "No, not here. Not now." I took a sip of water, set the glass down with care, let the silence work for me, instead of against me. "Of course not," I said finally. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant, controlled. "If she's that important to you." The emphasis on the last word was so slight I wasn't sure anyone else caught it, but Marcus did. I saw his jaw tighten. The waiter arrived with the main course, breaking the tension. Conversation resumed, but it felt forced now, like actors reading lines they'd forgotten to rehearse. My mother asked about the honeymoon. James talked about the photographer they'd hired. Sarah complimented the wine. I ate my dinner and smiled at the right moments and contributed to the conversation when expected. But inside, something had shifted. A door had closed. Another had opened. I watched Marcus laugh at one of James's jokes. watched him play the role of the charming, successful husband, and I thought about Victoria, about the way his mother's voice softened when she mentioned her name, about the photographs still on display, about the fact that he'd invited her without telling me until it was too late to do anything about it. By the time we left the club, the sun had set. Marcus held the car door open for me, ever the gentleman. I slid into the passenger seat of his Mercedes, the leather cool against my skin, and looked out at the manicured grounds disappearing behind us. He didn't try to explain, didn't apologize, just turned on the radio to fill the silence. And I understood then that this wasn't about Victoria coming to the wedding. This was about what happened after. 3 weeks before the wedding, I learned that silence could be a weapon. Marcus started mentioning her name the way people mention the weather. Casual, inevitable. Victoria suggested this restaurant for the rehearsal dinner. Victoria knows an amazing florist. Victoria thinks the band should play more jazz standards. I stopped responding with words, started responding with the space between them. When he'd finished talking, I'd wait, count to 3, then change the subject entirely. The first time I did it, confusion flickered across his face. By the 5th time, something else appeared. Irritation, maybe even concern. Good. The penthouse we shared had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 52 floors up, the world looked manageable, contained. I started spending more time there, looking down at the tiny cars and tinier people, while Marcus took phone calls in his study. I knew who he was talking to. The way his voice changed, softened around the edges. The way he'd laugh at things that weren't funny when I said them. One night, he was on the phone for 45 minutes. I heard my name once, just once, followed by a long pause and then, "She's fine with it." I walked out of the bedroom, didn't slam the door, just closed it with a soft click that somehow felt louder than shouting. The dress fitting was on a Thursday. Sarah had invited me to help her with final alterations, and I'd said yes before remembering that her future mother-in-law, my mother, would be there too. 3 generations of women in a bridal boutique, surrounded by white silk and unspoken expectations. My mother kept glancing at me like I was a problem she couldn't solve. Finally, while Sarah was in the dressing room, she leaned close. "Are you all right, sweetheart? You seem distant lately." Distant, as if I was the one creating space. "I'm fine, Mom. It's just that Marcus mentioned you've been quiet. He's worried about you." Of course, he'd told her I was the problem. Not that he'd invited his ex-girlfriend to a family wedding without consulting me. Not that he spent more time talking about Victoria than to his own wife. Just that I'd been quiet. I smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes but photographs well. "I've just been busy with work. You know how it is." She patted my hand, relieved to accept the easy answer. Sarah emerged in her wedding gown, and we all made the appropriate sounds of admiration. She looked beautiful, radiant. Everything a bride should be. I wondered if I'd looked like that. If Marcus had looked at me the way James looked at her, like she was the answer to a question he hadn't known he was asking. The rehearsal dinner was held at a restaurant Marcus had chosen. Not suggested. Chosen. Without asking me. I arrived wearing the black dress I'd bought without showing him. He did a double take when he saw me, and I felt a small, cold satisfaction. I'd forgotten he could still look at me like that. Then Victoria walked in. She was everything I'd imagined and worse. Tall, with that kind of effortless elegance that comes from never having to think about whether you belong. Her dress probably cost more than my car payment. She moved through the room like she owned it, air-kissing cheeks, laughing with her head thrown back. And when she reached Marcus, she hugged him. Not a polite, brief hug. A real one. The kind that says we have history. His hand lingered on her waist. 3 seconds too long. I counted. She looked at me over his shoulder, and our eyes met. Hers were assessing, calculating. She smiled, but it didn't touch her eyes either. "You must be his wife," she said, as if the word tasted strange in her mouth. "I've heard so much about you." Lies sounded so elegant in her accent. "Funny," I said softly. "He's mentioned you too." Marcus tensed. I saw it in the way his shoulders pulled back, the way his jaw tightened. He was waiting for me to make a scene, to give him a reason to paint me as jealous, unreasonable. I didn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, I turned to greet James and Sarah, leaving Marcus and Victoria standing together like the couple everyone thought they should have been. Throughout dinner, I watched. Not obviously, just enough to catalog every detail. The way Victoria touched his arm when she laughed. The way he leaned in when she spoke, as if her words were secrets worth keeping. The way his parents greeted her with genuine warmth, while my mother-in-law barely made eye contact with me. His father actually said it. Actually said the words out loud. "Victoria, darling, you look wonderful. You know, you've always been like a daughter to us." The table went quiet. Someone coughed. Sarah's hand found mine under the table and squeezed. I squeezed back once, then let go. Because I didn't need comfort. I needed clarity, and I was getting it in sharp, crystalline detail. After dinner, I went to the restroom. The kind of restroom that has a sitting area with velvet chairs and perfume samples. I was checking my makeup when I heard Victoria's voice in the hallway. She was talking to someone, her voice carrying, "It won't be long now. He's finally seeing what a mistake he made." I froze. "But she's his wife," another woman said. One of her friends, probably. "Please." She was never right for him. Different worlds, different everything. He knows it. His family knows it. It's just a matter of time. I should have felt devastated. Should have felt my world crumbling. Instead, I felt cold, calculated, clear. I walked out of the restroom, past Victoria and her friend, without acknowledging them, went straight to the table, collected my purse, and told Marcus I had an early morning meeting. He barely looked up from his conversation with Victoria. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m, I got up for water, passed through the living room where we kept the shared iPad charging. It lit up with a message notification. I shouldn't have looked, but marriage isn't built on shouldn't. The message was from Victoria. Tonight was perfect, like old times. I've missed this. Missed us. I scrolled up. Weeks of messages. Nothing explicitly inappropriate. Just intimate enough to hurt. Just familiar enough to show that whatever they were doing, it wasn't new. His last message, sent just an hour ago. I've been thinking about a lot of things lately. About choices I made. About what I really want. I took a screenshot, then another, and another. Then I set the iPad back on the charger and went to bed. But I didn't sleep. I planned. The botanical garden looked like something out of a fairy tale. 300 guests dressed in designer labels, string quartet playing Vivaldi, and enough flowers to bankrupt a small country. James had spared no expense. Every detail perfect. Every moment calculated to create memories that would last forever. I arrived in a dress that had cost me $3,000 and 3 weeks of careful planning. Midnight blue silk that caught the light when I moved. Hair swept up to show the diamond earrings I'd bought for myself. Not gifts from Marcus. Mine. When I stepped out of the car, I saw his face. The moment of recognition. The flash of something I couldn't quite name. Surprise, maybe. Or regret. Good. Victoria arrived 20 minutes later like she was the bride. A champagne-colored gown that probably had a French name I couldn't pronounce. She kissed Marcus on both cheeks, her hands lingering on his shoulders. His mother rushed over to greet her, embracing her like a returning daughter. I watched from across the lawn, a glass of champagne in my hand that I hadn't sipped. Watching. Always watching now. Sarah found me as guests were taking their seats for the ceremony. "You look stunning," she whispered, squeezing my arm. "Are you okay?" "I'm perfect," I said, and I meant it. There was a strange calm settling over me, the kind of calm that comes right before a storm. The ceremony was beautiful. James cried when he saw Sarah walking down the aisle. Real tears, the kind that come from actually loving someone. I felt my throat tighten, remembering when I thought Marcus and I had that, when I believed that love was enough. During the vows, I caught Marcus looking at Victoria, not at me, at her. 3 rows behind us, and he turned his head to find her in the crowd. She smiled at him. He smiled back. Something in my chest went very quiet, very still. The reception began with cocktails on the terrace overlooking the gardens. Sunset painted everything gold and pink, the kind of light that made everyone look softer, happier. I moved through the crowd with practiced grace, making conversation, laughing at jokes, playing the role of the successful businessman's wife. But I was counting the minutes Marcus spent at Victoria's table, counting the times he touched her arm, counting the moments he forgot I existed. 43 minutes, 16 touches, too many moments to count. When the dancing started, Marcus asked me for one obligatory dance. 2 minutes of his hand on my waist, barely touching. Then he thanked me like I was a distant relative he felt obligated to acknowledge. His second dance was with Victoria. 4 songs, 4 entire songs where they laughed and talked and moved like they'd done this 1,000 times before. I excused myself to the restroom, the kind of restroom that had marble countertops and real hand towels. I was reapplying lipstick when 2 women walked in. I recognized them from the cocktail hour, Victoria's friends. They didn't see me in the corner stall. "Did you see them out there?" one said. "It's like she doesn't even exist." "Well, can you blame him?" The other woman laughed. "I mean, look at Victoria. That's who he was supposed to marry. Everyone knows it. Do you think he'll actually leave her?" "Victoria says it's just a matter of time. He's already talking to lawyers, apparently. He just needs to wait for the right moment. You know how these things are. Appearances and all that." My hand froze on the lipstick. Lawyers. He was already talking to lawyers. God, can you imagine being married to someone who's clearly still in love with their ex? How humiliating. They left, still laughing. The door swung shut behind them. I looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. My makeup was perfect. My dress was flawless. But my eyes were different. Harder. Colder. Something inside me had finally completely broken free. I pulled out my phone, opened my email, and started typing. First, to my lawyer. The one I'd been consulting quietly for 2 weeks. The one who'd been reviewing every detail of our prenup, every joint account, every investment. Subject line: proceed immediately. Second, to my business partner. The one who'd been helping me quietly liquidate certain assets, move certain funds, protect certain interests. Subject line: execute tomorrow morning. Third, to a number I'd found in Victoria's social media. Her fiancé. Yes, fiancé. The man she was supposed to marry in 3 months. The man whose existence Marcus clearly didn't know about. I attached screenshots. The messages between Marcus and Victoria. Every single one. Subject line: I thought you should know. Then I made a call. To the wedding videographer. The one I'd hired separately from James and Sarah's official photographer. The one I'd paid extra for a specific service. "Do you have everything ready for tomorrow?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am. Exactly as you requested. The presentation will be ready to go." "Perfect. I'll let you know the exact timing." I ended the call, washed my hands, reapplied my lipstick one more time. Then I walked back out to the reception. Marcus was still with Victoria. They were at a corner table now, heads close together, talking about something that made them both smile. His hand was on the back of her chair, almost on her shoulder. Almost. I walked past them without stopping, found James and Sarah cutting the cake, surrounded by people who loved them, people who wanted their happiness to last. I kissed my brother's cheek, hugged my new sister-in-law. "Thank you for today," I told them. "It's been perfect." Sarah's eyes searched mine. She knew something had changed, but she didn't ask, just held my hand a moment longer than necessary. The rest of the reception blurred, toasts and dancing and laughter. Marcus never came looking for me. I saw him dance with Victoria twice more. Saw his mother sitting with her, leaning close like they were sharing secrets. At midnight, as the party started winding down, I stood on the terrace alone, looking out at the gardens, now lit with thousands of tiny lights. It really was beautiful, the kind of beauty that makes you believe in happy endings. My phone buzzed. A response from Victoria's fiancé. "Is this real?" "Yes," I typed back. "And there's more where that came from. Check your email tomorrow afternoon, around 2 o'clock. Trust me." Behind me, I heard Marcus's laugh, that specific laugh he used to give me, now given to someone else. I smiled. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, 300 witnesses would see exactly who Marcus really was, who Victoria really was. Tomorrow, I would teach them both what it means to underestimate someone. But tonight, I let them have their moment. Let them think they'd won. Let them believe I was just the obstacle in their path to happiness. Because the thing about silence is this: people mistake it for surrender. They have no idea it's just the quiet before the storm. If you want to see how I made them pay for every moment of humiliation, for every whispered insult, for every second they thought I wasn't enough, then stay with me. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Hit that like button if you're ready to see justice served cold. Comment and tell me what you would do in my position. And share this story with anyone who needs to remember that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. The final chapter is coming, and trust me, You won't want to miss a single moment of what I have planned. The next day started with champagne brunch at the venue, a tradition for close family and the wedding party. 60 people seated under white tents, mimosas flowing, everyone glowing with the afterglow of a perfect celebration. Marcus sat 3 seats away from me. Victoria was at his table. Of course, I wore white, a deliberate choice. A tailored pantsuit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. My armor for what was coming. Sarah caught my eye across the tent and smiled. She looked tired but happy. James had his arm around her, whispering something that made her laugh. They deserved this happiness. They deserved to start their marriage surrounded by love, not lies. That's why I'd waited until now, until their official ceremony was over, until their perfect day was preserved in photographs and memory. But now it was time. I stood up. The movement caught attention, the way standing always does when everyone else is seated and comfortable. Conversations tapered off. Eyes turned toward me. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," I said, my voice carrying across the tent. Calm, clear, but I wanted to make a toast to the happy couple. "If that's all right?" James nodded, confused but smiling. Someone handed me a microphone. I held it like a weapon. "James and Sarah," I began, looking at them directly. "Yesterday, I watched you promise to love each other honestly, to be faithful, to choose each other every single day for the rest of your lives." I paused. It reminded me what marriage is supposed to look like, what love is supposed to feel like, and it made me realize something important. Marcus shifted in his seat. I saw him exchange a glance with Victoria. Confused, not worried yet. They should have been worried. "Love requires truth," I continued, "and truth requires courage. So I want to share something with all of you, a different kind of wedding gift, a lesson about honesty." I nodded to the videographer, who'd been waiting by the projector screen that had shown the couple's photo montage the night before. The screen flickered to life, text messages, large enough for everyone to read. Marcus's name at the top of the conversation thread, Victoria's responses below. The tent went silent, the kind of silence that feels like the air has been sucked out of the world. I watched Marcus's face drain of color, watched Victoria's hand fly to her mouth, watched his mother's expression shift from confusion to horror to something harder, colder. "These are messages between my husband and his ex-girlfriend," I said, my voice still steady, still calm. Messages sent over the past 6 weeks, while he was planning to attend this wedding, while he was sleeping in our bed. While he was wearing his wedding ring, the messages scrolled slowly. Nothing explicitly sexual. That wasn't the point. The point was the intimacy, the familiarity, the clear emotional affair playing out in blue and gray text bubbles. "I miss us. I've been thinking about the choices I made. She was never right for me. Soon. Just be patient." Someone gasped. I think it was my mother. Marcus stood up. "This is not the time or place." "Really?" I cut him off. My voice was still soft, still controlled, but there was steel underneath now, because it seemed like the perfect time and place for you to parade your ex-girlfriend around my family, to humiliate me in front of 300 people, to make me feel invisible at my own brother's wedding. He had no answer for that. "But here's the interesting part," I continued, turning to face Victoria now. She was frozen in her seat, mascara already starting to run. "Victoria, darling, does your fiancé know you're here? Michael, right? The hedge fund manager you've been engaged to for 6 months?" The color that had drained from Marcus's face now drained from hers. "I sent him these screenshots last night," I said pleasantly, "along with a few others. He should be reading them right about." I checked my watch. Now, actually. As if on cue, Victoria's phone began vibrating on the table, over and over, angry buzzing that everyone could hear. She didn't reach for it. "You see?" I said, turning back to the crowd. Victoria wasn't trying to get Marcus back because she loved him. She was keeping him on the hook while securing a bigger fish. Hedging her bets, you might say. Playing both sides. Because that's what people like her do. Marcus was staring at Victoria now. Understanding dawning. Realizing he wasn't special. He was just convenient. "But let me tell you what really makes this interesting," I said. And now I let myself smile. Small. Cold. "Marcus, honey, do you remember those investments I made in your tech ventures? The silent partner funding that saved your last 3 acquisitions?" His eyes widened. He knew where this was going. "I pulled it all, every cent. As of 9 o'clock this morning, My lawyers executed a complete withdrawal of my financial involvement in your business affairs. You'll find the paperwork when you get home." His mother made a sound. A small, strangled noise. She knew what that meant. She knew exactly how much of her son's success had been funded by the wife he'd been planning to leave. "And that prenup you insisted on?" I continued. "The one your lawyer drew up to protect your family's assets? My lawyer was better. Every loophole, every clause, every protection you thought you had, I'm entitled to half of everything we built together. And since I can prove emotional abandonment and infidelity, the settlement is going to be very, very generous. To me." Marcus sank back into his chair like his strings had been cut. "So here's the lesson," I said, looking around the tent at all these people who'd watched him disrespect me, who'd smiled at Victoria, who'd treated me like I was temporary. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never assume silence means weakness. And never ever forget that the person you're betraying might be smarter than you. I set the microphone down on the table. The sound echoed in the absolute silence. Then I walked over to James and Sarah. They were staring at me with identical expressions of shock. "I'm sorry," I told them softly. "I'm sorry to do this at your celebration, but some lessons can't wait, and some people need to be reminded that actions have consequences." I kissed Sarah's cheek, hugged my brother. "Congratulations. You two are going to be so happy together. Real happiness. The kind built on truth." Sarah's eyes were wet. She squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. I turned to leave. The crowd parted like water. No one tried to stop me. No one said a word. At the entrance to the tent, I paused, looked back one last time. Marcus was still sitting there, destroyed. Victoria was crying into her phone. His mother was staring at me with something that looked almost like respect. "Oh, and Marcus?" I called back. "I'm keeping the penthouse. It's in my name. You have until Friday to collect your things." Then I walked out into the sunlight, got into the car I'd arranged, and drove away from that life forever. 6 months later, I was standing in my new downtown loft, all windows and light and space that was entirely mine. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks earlier. The settlement was exactly as generous as I'd promised. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah with a photo, her hand on her slightly rounded belly, James grinning behind her. "We wanted you to be the first to know. We're naming you Godmother, because you taught us what it means to stand up for yourself. Love you." I smiled, set the phone down, looked out at the city spread beneath me. Marcus had tried to call 47 times in the first month. Then the calls stopped. I heard through mutual friends that he'd tried to reconcile with Victoria. She'd blocked him. Married Michael 3 months ago in a ceremony that made James and Sarah's look modest. His business was struggling. Turned out my investment had been more crucial than he'd realized. His mother had stopped speaking to him, not because he'd cheated, because he'd been stupid enough to get caught and lose the woman who'd been funding his lifestyle. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel much of anything about him anymore. There was a knock at my door. I checked the camera. A man in a tailored suit holding flowers. The architect I'd met at a gallery opening last week. The one who'd asked me to dinner and actually listened when I talked. I opened the door. "Hi," he said, smiling. Genuine, warm. "Ready?" "Ready," I said. And I was. Ready for whatever came next. Ready for a life built on truth instead of tolerance. Ready to be seen. Really seen. I'd taught Marcus a lesson, but I'd learned one too. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something better. Something real. Something that's entirely, completely, perfectly yours. And walking away from people who never deserved you in the first place.